It was January 6th. It was the strongest Santa Ana winds I'd ever witnessed that were howling through the mountain passes when Eaton Canyon burst into flames. By January the 8th, Altadena was on fire. The air was thick with soot, making it difficult to breathe. All else was lost to the flames. It wasn't safe for residents to return to Altadena. Gas lines had to be shut off, electrical wires had to be cleared, and debris had to be searched for hazardous materials and human remains. Yellow police line tape stretched 6 miles from the east to the Arroyo Seco in the west, with National Guard troops stationed at every street entering Altadena. On January the 20th, residents with ID were finally allowed entry. Catastrophic fire damage engulfed all of Altadena. I surveyed what had become known as West Altadena, where I lived and worked many years. 324 East Wapello, the address of the school and cultural center known as Okeyo Jumal, where we would begin lifetime friendships. These two massive pine trees fronted the building that we moved from in 1980. However, the building was totally destroyed by the fire. The entire neighborhood had been burned to the ground. I'm driving down Fair Oaks from Loma Alta to Altadena Drive. This is the southwest corner of Altadena Drive in Fair Oaks, once the home of Tabea Davis and family, a very beautiful home surrounded by the tall hedges. Now just the burned hedges remain. This entire block of Olive Avenue was totally devastated. This cul-de-sac at the end of La Fiesta and Calaveras was the home of the Calendis and the Blancs. Now gone. The house at Grandeur in Poppyfield was once the home of two of my aunties. As you can see, the house is now destroyed. I was contacted by a mutual friend who stated that Robert, a craftsman of musical instruments, had been evacuated but had no time to take any of his creations. She said, please check and see if this house survived. It's the yellow house on the corner of Palm Street. Turning the corner, it was impossible that anything had survived. The entire neighborhood had been decimated. But as I neared the corner, there it was, the yellow house, Robert's house. By some good fortune, it had survived. "521 Loma Alta was once the home of Konada and Latifah Dotsey. At one time, the large home hosted many birthdays and naming ceremonies. Now only the large oak tree remains. Driving up Cheney Trail, there is a turnout at about 2,000 feet in which you can get a bird's eye view of the devastation. There is also the view of Lavina, a gated community at the end of Lincoln Avenue. It has been reported that 50 homes were destroyed in Lavina. Just a couple of doors west of all the destruction on Lake Avenue, Altadena Vista Senior Apartments survived. All the occupants were safely evacuated, including a very good friend of ours. And to the cheers of its occupants, the building itself survived. Elliott, once a junior high school, then a middle school, and now a arts magnet school, was severely damaged. To the shock of many, all the massive pine trees lining Santa Rosa, also known as Christmas Tree Lane, survived. Some of the houses on the east side of the street were damaged, but on the west side, it was all good. The Balayan house, also known as the ice cream house, was still standing. Many had asked if John Muir High School had survived. John Muir, along with all its athletic fields, received no damage. Franklin Elementary School, and it's located west of Lincoln Avenue and was one of the few buildings in that area that was destroyed. On Fair Oaks, just north of Woodbury Road, one of the larger churches in West Altadena, Metropolitan Baptist, survived. Just south of Woodbury Road and on the west side of Lincoln Avenue, Perry's Joint, jazz-themed cafe opened nearly 20 years ago. I had the reading of my historical novel there, and as I now sit in conversation with Perry Bennett, the owner, and Michael Mims, historian. And pleased to say that Perry's Joint is still with us. I've heard mentioned in news media that Altadena was a black community, and that's a bit of a misnomer. Up until 1960, there were no blacks living in Altadena. Altadena was even known as a sundown town. But with the Civil Rights Act, blacks were then allowed to move in the 60s, and of course, we had what was then called white flight. And since at the same time, coincidentally, Pasadena was ripping out much of the black community to put in the 210 and the 710 freeways. So there were a lot of people on the move to to find new homes, and many would move into Altadena. As fast as those whites would move out, blacks would come moving in, and this was predominantly in West Altadena. And this would take place, and it probably leveled out. The whites that stayed and the blacks that came in made a beautiful community, and along with that came a lot of Asians, Hispanics from the islands of Tonga and Samoa, And so this right here is made with is the balance of Altadena. The population of Altadena overall is about 42,000. Of that, 19% is black. But if you move into West Altadena, that goes up to about 40% white and about same as black. And the other the other groups making up the balance. So yes, it is a large concentrated black community in West Altadena, and so that would be the correction I would make on them, always referring to it as this black community. The Meadows is a real estate development up one road, and it goes up to a small mesa. The problem is that there's only one road in, and it looks like a natural fire trap. However, over the brush fires and so forth over the years, it has always seemed to survive, just as it did this time. Located west of Lincoln Avenue on Altadena Drive, Audubon Elementary School was leased to the Head Start program back in the 80s, where I would be the program coordinator. The school building survived the fire with no damage. And many of the young people that were part of that program are residents of West Altadena. Also from the school here and at Okeyo Jumal, parents and students were introduced to the mountains. The mountain trails and campgrounds were like our backyard. One of the major reasons why the Altadenans preferred to stay part of the county and not the city was for the love of their horses. It was a common sight to see horses on the streets of West Altadena. This is a ride through the Florida neighborhood, which is just west of the Audubon School. And again, being west of Lincoln Avenue, this area received very little, if any, fire damage. Still west of Lincoln Avenue and buttressing the Arroyo Seco is the Vista Laguna neighborhood. All the way west from Lincoln Avenue is the Arroyo Seco, and in the Arroyo Seco is JPL, or Jet Propulsion Laboratory, NASA. Notice the red ring on the hills behind the buildings. That's fire retardant, and the ring encompasses JPL. JPL was never threatened by the fire. Over the years, many times I've heard brush and forest fires have been started by some poor homeless guy trying to get warm. That one's not going to fly this time. Several home video cameras and security systems caught the exact moment that this fire ignited. Electrical arcs struck the ground below the towers. Maintenance of the power line and ownership would be Southern California Edison. What at best could be received as a horrendous administrative failure, the order to evacuate never reached West Altadena until a few minutes before the flames. People fled with only what they had on, no time to grab documents, medicines, photos, and pictures, not even pets. All they could save was in their pockets or on their backs. Over 9,000 structures were destroyed. 6,900 were residential. 15,000 were made homeless out of a population of 40,000. All 17 Eaton fire deaths occurred in West Altadena. With Altadena or Los Angeles County having few social services in place, Pasadena flung open its doors. The convention center was used for emergency housing. Community centers were preparing sandwiches and hot meals. Volunteers staffed the parks so that they could sort out the clothes with stacks for men, women, and children. The city council members, using social media, kept all informed as to services that were available. Flats of water were being handed to cars as they circled the block. Drinking water had been contaminated with soot and ashes. I was listening to a lot of the people as they came through. Everybody, we're strong, we're not going. Altadena is going to rebuild, even though some said, yes, but it won't be what we had. It's going to be a lot of cookie cutter houses and so forth. That made me think about back in 1906, it would have been San Francisco. After the earthquake, then it was the fire that created all the damage. San Francisco was burned to the ground. And people then, you heard and you could read about, they said we could never build back the city that was. San Francisco was a beautiful city. And then they began to put it all together. And when it was finished, not only did they build the city back, they built it better. It is one of the most beautiful cities in the country. So, Altadena, as those who I heard say, we're not going anywhere. We're going to build it back. And not only will we build it back, we can build it better. Thank you. Jamal Okeyo Jumal, griot historian.